The church bell rang out long and clear, echoing through the cold morning air of Austin. I, Emily Turner, 29 years old, a waitress at a roadside diner, sat on the worn wooden pew, my fingers purple from the biting cold. 3 children pressed close against both sides of my body. 5 years ago, I found them in a dumpster behind a gas station. Tiny bodies trembling in waves, breath thin as smoke in the freezing Texas night. From that moment, I swore to God I would never let them be alone. When the heavy hand of the pastor rested on my shoulder, I heard clearly every word he spoke. You have kept God's promise. The eyes in the chapel turned toward me, no longer distant, but filled with recognition. But in that very moment, I didn't realize that this fragile glory was only the prelude to a tearing apart of my identity as a mother. The memory pulls me back like an undertow I cannot resist. It was December 2019, the coldest winter Austin had seen in a decade. I was finishing my graveyard shift at Rosie's Diner, the kind of place where truckers stop for coffee at 3 a.m. and the fluorescent lights buzz like dying insects. My apron still smelled of grease and desperation when I walked behind the Chevron station to take a shortcut home. That's when I heard it, a sound so faint I almost mistook it for the wind rattling through empty beer cans. But wind doesn't whimper. Wind doesn't gasp for air with the urgency of something clinging to life. The dumpster was rusted green, overflowing with trash bags that someone had been too lazy to push all the way in. And there, wedged between a box of motor oil and rotting food, was a cardboard box. Not sealed, not hidden, just abandoned. Inside were 3 infants, no more than a few days old, wrapped in a single stained blanket that couldn't have cost more than $5. Their lips were blue, their tiny fists curled against the cold. One of them, the boy I would later name Liam, looked directly at me with eyes that seemed to ask a question I couldn't refuse to answer. Will you let us die? I didn't think. I didn't call the police first. I didn't follow protocol. I scooped all 3 of them into my arms, feeling their heartbeats flutter against my chest like trapped birds, and I ran. My apartment was 6 blocks away, a studio above a laundromat where the walls were so thin you could hear your neighbor's arguments word for word. I laid them on my bed, turned the heater up until the room felt like a furnace, and wrapped them in every towel and blanket I owned. Only then did I call 911. The paramedics came. Child Protective Services came. A tired woman with a clipboard and coffee breath told me the babies would go into the system, that I'd done the right thing by calling, and that I should move on with my life. But when she tried to take them from my arms, Sophia, the smallest of the 3 girls, wrapped her tiny fingers around my thumb with a grip that felt like a vow. I looked at that social worker and said something I didn't know I had the courage to say. No, they're staying with me. She laughed. Actually laughed. Miss, you work minimum wage at a diner. You don't even have a 2-bedroom apartment. You can't possibly— I don't care what I can't do, I interrupted, my voice shaking but steady. I care about what I won't do, and I won't let them disappear into a system that will separate them and forget them. It took 3 months of paperwork, home visits, and court appearances before I became their emergency foster parent. 3 months of working double shifts, mornings at the diner, evenings cleaning rooms at the Sunset Motel on the highway, nights sewing hems for a local tailor who paid under the table. I slept 4 hours a night if I was lucky. I ate whatever the diner let me take home. Day-old biscuits, soup that had sat too long, coffee until my hands shook. But every morning, I woke up to 3 faces that looked at me like I was the entire world. My mother, Carolyn Turner, called me once during those first months. Just once. You're throwing your life away for someone else's trash, she said, her voice sharp as broken glass over the phone line. You could have gone to nursing school. You could have made something of yourself. I am making something of myself, I whispered, looking at the 3 cribs I'd assembled from garage sale parts. I'm making a family. She hung up, didn't call again for 2 years. The people in my life fell into 2 categories: those who pitied me and those who resented me. My co-workers at Rosie's stopped inviting me to after-shift drinks because I always said no. I had to get home to the babies. My landlord raised my rent twice, saying the crying was disturbing other tenants. Old friends from high school sent texts asking if I'd figured out my situation yet, as if 3 human lives were a situation to be figured out rather than a calling to be honored. But there were small mercies, too. Mrs. Chen, who ran the laundromat downstairs, started watching the triplets for free during my morning shifts. She never said why, just smiled and said, "I know what it's like to be alone." Father Miguel from the Baptist Church began leaving bags of diapers and formula on my doorstep, anonymous except for the small notes that always said the same thing: God sees you. And Dr. Ramesh at the county health clinic started scheduling the baby's checkups at the end of the day so I wouldn't lose work hours, never charging me the full amount, always marking something down as covered by assistance. By the time the triplets turned 2, I had become invisible in a new way. Not invisible like before, when I was just another face serving coffee and taking orders. Now I was invisible because people saw me only as a function. The woman with those 3 kids. At the grocery store, strangers would stare at my cart full of generic brand formula and diapers, their expressions a mix of pity and judgment. At the park, other mothers would smile tightly and gather their children a little closer, as if poverty were contagious. I learned to hold my head up anyway, to pretend I didn't notice the whispers, to let Liam and Sophia and Emma climb on the playground equipment with the same joy as any other child. What no one understood, what no one could understand unless they'd held a dying infant in their arms and felt the moment that life decides to stay, was that I wasn't sacrificing anything. I was becoming something. Every sleepless night, every skipped meal, every time I chose their needs over my own wasn't a loss. It was an accumulation of purpose. It was the slow, painful, beautiful process of becoming someone I could respect when I looked in the mirror. But respect, I would learn, is not the same as recognition, and recognition is not the same as protection. I met Jack Sullivan on a Tuesday afternoon in September, in the least romantic place imaginable, the Travis County Sheriff's Department. I was there because someone had stolen my bicycle, the one I used to get to work when I couldn't afford bus fare. He was there because someone had stolen his truck, a Ford F-250 worth more than I'd earn in 5 years. We ended up sitting next to each other in the waiting area, both filling out incident reports, both exhausted by the bureaucracy of loss. He was tall, weathered in the way that comes from actual work rather than a gym, with calluses on his hands and dust still clinging to his boots. When he spoke, his voice had the slow, deliberate cadence of someone who'd learned that words matter. "What did they take from you?" he asked, not looking up from his paperwork. "My bike," I said, feeling the inadequacy of it. It was how I got to work." He glanced over then, really looked at me for the first time. "Where do you work?" "Rosie's Diner, out on Highway 71. Something shifted in his expression. Not pity, exactly, but recognition. "I know that place. You're the one who always remembers how truckers like their coffee." I blinked, surprised. "You've been there?" "Every Thursday for the past 2 years, he said, a small smile tugging at his mouth. "Black coffee, no sugar, and you always warm the cup first so it doesn't cool down too fast." It was such a small detail, such an insignificant thing to remember, but in that moment it felt like being seen for the first time in years. Not as a charity case, not as a struggling single mother, just as someone who was good at her job. "I'm Jack Sullivan," he said, extending his hand. "Emily Turner." His handshake was firm, grounded, the kind that made you believe in the reliability of another person. We talked while we waited, about the rising crime rate, about the absurdity of police reports, about nothing important and everything that mattered. When the officer finally called us up, Jack gave his statement about the stolen truck, a work vehicle from his ranch, taken from the parking lot of a feed store, probably by someone who needed it more than wanted it. As we walked out together, he paused by his remaining truck, a newer model, just as dusty as his boots. "Can I give you a ride somewhere?" he asked. "Seems like the least I can do since you're down a bike and I've still got wheels." I should have said no. I should have kept my life separate, kept my struggles private, kept the wall up that I'd built between myself and people who had resources I couldn't imagine. But it was getting dark, and the bus route had been cut, and I was so tired of fighting every small battle alone. "Okay," I said, "thank you." On the drive to my apartment, he asked about my life in the way that people rarely do, actually listening to the answers, asking follow-up questions that showed he was paying attention. I told him about the triplets, expecting the conversation to end there the way it always did, but instead, his expression softened. "That's remarkable," he said quietly. "Taking in 3 babies when you barely had enough for yourself. That's real courage." "It wasn't courage," I replied, looking out the window at the Austin skyline blurring past. "It was just the only choice I could live with." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "That's what courage is. Doing the thing you have to do even when it costs everything." When we pulled up to my building, the one with the cracked facade and the flickering neon sign from the laundromat, I expected to see judgment in his eyes. But there was only thoughtfulness. He wrote his number on the back of a receipt and handed it to me. "If you ever need anything," he said, "a ride, help with something, anything, you call me." I took the receipt, certain I would never use it. "Thank you, Jack." "I mean it," he said, his eyes holding mine. "People like you, people who actually give a damn, shouldn't have to do it alone." I carried that receipt in my pocket for 3 weeks before I finally called him. It was October, and Emma had gotten sick. Nothing serious, just a fever and a cough, but serious enough that I couldn't leave her with Mrs. Chen. I'd already missed 2 shifts at the diner, and my manager had made it clear that one more absence would mean finding someone more reliable. Jack answered on the second ring. "I hate to ask," I began, "but what do you need?" He interrupted, no hesitation in his voice. "My daughter's sick, and I can't miss work, but I can't find anyone to watch her, and "I'll be there in 20 minutes, he said. "We'll figure it out." He arrived in 15. And he didn't just drop me off at the diner. He insisted on staying with all 3 kids, learning their routines, reading them stories in his rumbling voice that made them giggle. When I came home that night, exhausted and smelling of fryer oil, I found him asleep on my couch with Liam sprawled across his chest and the girls curled up on either side. That was the beginning of something I hadn't known I was allowed to want: partnership. Over the following months, Jack became a constant presence. He'd show up on my days off with groceries, never making a show of it, never making me feel like charity, just saying he picked up too much at the store, or wasn't going to eat all this anyway. He taught Liam how to throw a baseball. He helped Emma with her alphabet. He sat with Sophia when she had nightmares, his patience infinite. And slowly, carefully, he began to teach me that accepting help wasn't weakness. It was wisdom. In December, exactly 5 years after I'd found the triplets, Jack asked me to dinner. An actual dinner, just the 2 of us, while Mrs. Chen watched the kids. We went to a steakhouse I'd only ever seen from the outside, where the portions were enormous and the lighting was soft, and everyone seemed to speak in hushed, important tones. "I need to tell you something," he said over dessert, his expression serious. "About my past." I set down my fork, my chest tightening with the anticipation of loss. This was the moment, I thought. The moment when he'd reveal why someone like him had been spending time with someone like me. The moment when the fairy tale would end. "I was married," he began, his voice steady but his eyes distant. Her name was Sarah. We had the triplets together. The world tilted. What? 5 years ago, he continued, Sarah and I were driving back from the hospital with the babies. They were 2 days old when someone ran us off the road. A deliberate hit. Sarah died instantly. I was in a coma for 5 years. When I woke up 6 months ago, the first thing I asked was where my children were. My hands were shaking. Jack, I don't understand. The babies were gone, he said, his jaw tight with old pain. The police told me they'd been found abandoned behind a gas station. They'd been in the system, then with a foster mother. They gave me a name. Emily Turner. The restaurant noise faded to white static. You knew? This whole time? Not at first, he said quickly. I didn't put it together until I saw you at the sheriff's department. Then I looked into it. Found out everything. Why didn't you say something? My voice cracked. Why didn't you take them back? He leaned forward, his eyes fierce and wet. Because you saved them, Emily. When I couldn't. When I was lying in a hospital bed, useless and absent, you were there. You were the one who heard them crying in that dumpster. You were the one who gave up everything to keep them alive, to keep them together, to make them feel loved. He reached across the table, taking my trembling hands in his steady ones. You didn't just find my children. You became their mother. I was crying now, tears streaming down my face in a restaurant full of strangers who politely pretended not to notice. But they're yours, by blood, by right. They're ours, he said simply. If you'll have me, if you'll have all of us. That night, sitting in his truck outside my apartment, Jack told me the rest of the story, about how someone had sabotaged his truck's brakes that night 5 years ago, about how the police had investigated but never found enough evidence to prosecute, about his suspicions regarding Melissa Grant, his ex-girlfriend from college, the daughter of a Texas state senator, a woman who'd never forgiven him for choosing Sarah instead of her. I can't prove it, he said, staring out at the darkened street. But I know it was her, and I know she's still out there. Why would she do something so horrible? I whispered. Because people like Melissa don't accept rejection, he replied. They see it as theft. In her mind, Sarah stole something that belonged to her. And if she couldn't have me and our life together, she'd make sure no one could. It should have terrified me. It should have made me run. But instead, I felt something clarify inside me. A understanding that some battles choose you, and refusing to fight them doesn't make them go away. What do we do? I asked. He looked at me then with something like awe. We protect our family. Together. Jack's ranch, Sullivan Cattle Company, sprawled across 2,000 acres of Texas hill country, all rolling pastures and ancient oak trees and cattle that moved like slow rivers across the land. The main house was a sprawling structure of limestone and wood, built by his grandfather in the 1950s, and maintained with the kind of attention that comes from genuine respect for the past. When he brought me and the triplets there for the first time, Liam's eyes went wide. Is this where we're going to live? He asked, his small hand gripping mine. Sometimes, Jack said, crouching down to Liam's eye level. When your mom says it's okay. The weight of that mom settled over me like a blessing and a burden. Because the moment Jack acknowledged it publicly, the moment he introduced me to his family and his world as the mother of his children, I knew our quiet life of anonymity was over. The Sullivan family gathered at the ranch every Sunday after church, a tradition that stretched back generations. There were Jack's parents, Robert and Margaret, weathered and kind in the way of people who'd survived hard years through partnership. There were his siblings, Daniel, who managed the ranch's business operations, and Caroline, a veterinarian who lived in Houston but came home whenever she could. There were cousins and their spouses, nieces and nephews, and a tangled web of relationships that I struggled to map in my mind. They welcomed me with the kind of politeness that masks evaluation. Margaret hugged me and said all the right things, but her eyes kept drifting to the triplets, cataloging their features, looking for traces of Sarah in their faces. Robert shook my hand with a grip that felt like a test. Daniel was friendly, but distant. Caroline was the only one who seemed genuinely warm, pulling me aside in the kitchen to say, "Thank you for taking care of them, for taking care of him." But it was at the third Sunday dinner, in late February, when the bluebonnets were just beginning to bloom across the pastures, that everything changed. We were gathered in the great room, the children playing on the floor while the adults talked and laughed, when the front door opened without a knock. A woman walked in with the confidence of someone who considered herself perpetually welcome. She was tall, expensively dressed, her blonde hair styled with the kind of precision that requires both money and obsession. Everything about her was calculated: the sympathetic tilt of her head, the soft modulation of her voice, the way her hand touched Jack's arm with familiar possession. "Jack," she said, her voice honey and venom. "I heard you were back. I had to come see for myself." The room went silent. Jack stood slowly, his body language rigid. Melissa Grant. I'd heard the name, but seeing her in person was different. She moved through the room like she owned it, greeting Jack's family with kisses and familiarity before her eyes finally landed on me. The assessment was instant and brutal. She looked at me the way you'd look at a stain on an expensive carpet. "And who is this?" she asked, though her tone made it clear she already knew. "This is Emily," Jack said, moving to stand beside me. "Emily, this is Melissa Grant, an old acquaintance." "Oh, Jack, don't be modest," Melissa laughed, the sound like breaking glass. "We were much more than acquaintances." She turned to me, her smile sharp. "I'm sure Jack's told you all about our history, how we were engaged before he made other choices." I felt the triplets pressing against my legs, sensing the tension. Emma's small hand gripped my skirt. "It's nice to meet you," I managed, my voice steadier than I felt. Melissa's eyes dropped to the children, and something flickered across her face, something hungry and possessive. "And these must be Sarah's children. My God, they've grown so much. I haven't seen them since before the accident." She crouched down, trying to make eye contact with them, but all three children shrank back behind me. "Don't you remember me? I used to visit you when you were babies, before your mommy died." "That's enough," Jack said, his voice low and dangerous, but Melissa straightened, looking at me with faux concern. "I'm sorry, I don't mean to be insensitive. I'm sure you've done your best with them. It must be so hard, playing babysitter to someone else's children." The words landed like a slap. The room held its breath. I felt my face flush, felt the old shame trying to rise up, felt myself becoming small again, just the poor waitress who didn't belong in this world of ranches and family legacies. Then Liam's voice cut through the tension. "She's not a babysitter. She's our mom." Melissa laughed, actually laughed. "Oh, sweetheart, that's very sweet, but—" "No!" Emma stepped forward, her small body trembling with anger. "She is our mom. She found us and saved us and loves us." Sophia, the quietest of the three, simply wrapped her arms around my leg and stared at Melissa with an expression of pure distrust. The room erupted in a wave of sound, Jack's family all speaking at once, some defending the children, some trying to calm the situation. But through it all, I heard Margaret Sullivan's voice, clear and commanding. "Melissa, I think it's time you left." Melissa's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something cold and furious beneath. "Of course. I can see I'm not welcome here." She looked directly at me. "But we'll talk again soon, Emily. I think there are things about this family, about Jack's past, that you deserve to know." She left in a swirl of expensive perfume and veiled threats. The moment the door closed behind her, I sank into a chair, my legs suddenly unable to hold me. Jack knelt in front of me, taking my hands. I'm sorry, he said. I should have warned you. I should have. Is she dangerous? I interrupted, looking into his eyes and seeing the answer before he spoke. Yes, he said quietly. I believe she is. That night, after we'd put the children to bed in the ranch's guest house, Jack and I sat on the porch watching the stars emerge across the vast Texas sky. He told me everything he'd been holding back, how Melissa had stalked him during his relationship with Sarah, how she'd sent threatening letters, how she'd shown up at their wedding and had to be escorted out by security, how the police had questioned her after the accident but could never prove anything. She's connected, Jack explained, his voice tired. Her father is Senator Malcolm Grant. He's been in Texas politics for 30 years. Every time we got close to evidence, it disappeared. Witnesses changed their stories. Security footage was conveniently erased. So what do we do? I asked. He looked at me, his expression both grateful and guilty. We document everything. We keep the kids close. We build a case so airtight that even a senator can't make it disappear. He paused. But Emily, if this gets too dangerous, if you want to take the kids and go somewhere safe, I'll understand. This isn't your fight. I thought about that dumpster 5 years ago, about 3 babies who would have died if I'd walked a different route home, about the life I'd built from nothing but love and stubbornness, about the man sitting beside me who'd somehow become the missing piece I didn't know I needed. Yes, it is, I said simply. They're my children. You're my family. This is exactly my fight. Melissa Grant launched her campaign with the precision of someone who'd been planning it for years. It started small, concerned looks from other mothers at the triplets' preschool, whispered conversations that stopped when I walked into a room. Then came the friendly visits from Child Protective Services, responding to anonymous concerns about the children's living situation. Each time, the social workers found nothing wrong. In fact, they found 3 thriving, happy children who clearly adored their mother. But the message was clear. Someone was watching, waiting for us to slip. Then Melissa escalated. She began showing up at places we frequented: the county health clinic where Dr. Ramesh treated the children, the grocery store where I bought supplies, even Rosie's diner during my shifts. She'd sit at the counter, order coffee, and watch me work with an expression of amused contempt. When I'd bring her order, she'd smile sweetly and say things designed to burrow under my skin. Must be exhausting, she'd say, working so hard for children who aren't really yours. Jack told me you found them in a dumpster, like stray kittens. I've been thinking about how Sarah would feel, knowing a stranger is raising her babies. I learned to swallow my responses, to smile professionally, to pretend her words didn't cut. But at night, alone in my apartment, I'd lie awake wondering if she was right, if loving them was enough, if blood mattered more than sacrifice, if I was fooling myself into thinking I could ever be more than a placeholder. Jack noticed my withdrawal. She's in your head, he said one evening, pulling me into his arms. That's her strategy. She can't attack you directly, so she's making you attack yourself. What if she's right? I whispered against his chest. What if I'm not enough? He pulled back, forcing me to meet his eyes. Emily Turner, you saved 3 lives when you had no obligation to do so. You worked 3 jobs to keep them fed and safe. You gave up your dreams, your comfort, your entire life to make sure they had a chance. Don't you dare let that woman convince you that biology matters more than devotion. But Melissa wasn't content with psychological warfare. In March, she filed a petition with the family court, a request to review the custody arrangement, citing her deep connection to the children through their late mother and her concerns about their current living situation. The legal papers arrived on a Tuesday, delivered by a process server who apologized even as he handed me the envelope. I read them in my car, parked outside the diner, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the pages. Melissa was arguing that as Sarah's closest friend and someone who'd been present in the children's lives since birth. She had standing to petition for custody. She was arguing that I was financially unstable and unprepared to provide the lifestyle these children deserved. She was arguing that Jack's recent re-entry into their lives was disruptive and that a more stable parental figure should be appointed. The hearing was set for April 15th. I had 6 weeks to prove that I deserved to keep my children. Jack hired the best family law attorney in Austin, Rachel Brennan, a woman with a reputation for taking on impossible cases and winning them through sheer tenacity. She was in her 50s, sharp as a scalpel, and had no patience for sentiment or self-pity. "Tell me the truth," she said at our first meeting. "All of it. Because if I'm surprised in court, we lose." So I told her. About finding the babies. About the 5 years of struggle. About meeting Jack and discovering the truth. About Melissa's escalating harassment. Rachel listened without interrupting, taking notes in precise handwriting, her expression giving nothing away. When I finished, she set down her pen and looked at me directly. "You know what the hardest part of this case will be? Proving I'm a good mother?" I guessed. "No, proving that Melissa isn't." She leaned back in her chair. Grant's daughter has unlimited resources, political connections, and a narrative that sounds good. Tragic death of her best friend, wanting to honor that friend's memory by helping raise the children. She'll paint herself as stable, wealthy, and devoted. She'll paint you as a struggling waitress who bit off more than she can chew. "So we can't win?" My voice was hollow. "I didn't say that." Rachel's smile was predatory. "I said it would be hard, but we have advantages. We have 5 years of documented care. We have Jack's testimony as the biological father. We have the children themselves, old enough now to express preference. And most importantly, we have the truth." She paused. "But we need more. We need to prove that Melissa's motives aren't pure, that she's dangerous. Can you help me do that?" I thought about the veiled threats, the stalking, the convenient timing of her interest in the children. "Yes," I said. "I can." Over the next 6 weeks, we built our case like archaeologists excavating a buried city. Rachel hired private investigators who dug into Melissa's past, finding a pattern of obsessive behavior, restraining orders from 2 ex-boyfriends, a sealed juvenile record for stalking a teacher, complaints from co-workers at her various jobs. We documented every time she'd shown up at the ranch uninvited. We compiled the CPS reports that had all been filed anonymously from the same IP address, traced back to Melissa's home network. We found witnesses who'd seen Melissa following me, photographing the children, making inquiries about our daily routines. But the strongest evidence came from an unexpected source. Dr. Ramesh from the county health clinic. When Rachel interviewed him as part of Discovery, he mentioned something that made her pause. Melissa had been coming to the clinic recently, asking detailed questions about the triplets' medical histories, claiming she needed the information for family records. "That's strange," Rachel said. "She's not family. Why would he tell her anything?" "I didn't," Dr. Ramesh replied. "I refused. She became quite angry about it, said I'd regret obstructing her." Rachel's eyes gleamed. "Did you document that conversation?" "Of course, I document everything. That documentation, showing Melissa's aggressive attempts to access confidential medical records, became a key piece of our case. It established a pattern of boundary violation and inappropriate possessiveness. Meanwhile, the children were struggling. They didn't understand why we had to meet with lawyers, why strangers were asking them questions about where they wanted to live, why the nice lady from the court kept visiting to observe our family dynamics. Liam started having nightmares. Emma became clingy, crying whenever I left for work. Sophia, always the quietest, simply stopped talking to anyone but me and Jack. One night, about 2 weeks before the hearing, Liam crawled into my bed at 2 a.m., his small body shaking. "Mama," he whispered. He'd started calling me that a year ago, tentatively at first, then with growing confidence. Are they going to take us away? I pulled him close, feeling his heart racing against mine. No, baby, I promise. But that lady said, I don't care what that lady said. I smoothed his hair back from his forehead, a gesture I'd made 10,000 times in 5 years. You know what I told you about promises? About how I promised I'd never leave you? He nodded against my chest. I keep my promises, Liam. Always. We're a family, and families don't get broken just because someone mean wants them to be. He was quiet for a moment, then, Dad said that too, that families fight for each other. Dad. He'd started calling Jack that just last month, after Jack had officially proposed to me on the ranch, the triplets standing beside him holding a sign that read, Will you marry all of us? It wasn't legal yet. We'd decided to wait until after the custody hearing to avoid complicating things. But in every way that mattered, we were already a family. Dad's right, I whispered, and we're going to fight. But I need you to be brave, okay? Can you do that for me? Okay, Mama. He was quiet again then. If we went to live with that lady, would you come too? The question broke something in me. That's not going to happen, sweetheart. But if it did? I held him tighter, my tears soaking into his hair. Then I would fight until I got you back. I would never, ever stop fighting. The night before the hearing, Jack and I sat on the porch of the ranch house, watching a spring thunderstorm roll across the hills. Lightning flickered in the distance, illuminating the landscape in brief, stark flashes. Are you scared? He asked, his hand finding mine in the darkness. Terrified, I admitted. What if it's not enough? What if 5 years of love doesn't matter compared to her money and connections? Then we appeal, and we keep fighting, as long as it takes. He turned to face me, his expression fierce in the lightning's glow. But Emily, I need you to understand something. No matter what happens tomorrow, you are their mother. Not because a court says so, not because biology dictates it, because you chose them when no one else would, because you gave them life when they were dying. That's not something anyone can take away, no matter what a judge decides. It feels like they can, I whispered. I know. He pulled me against him, and we sat there in the storm, two people who'd found each other through tragedy and were now fighting to keep what we'd built from being torn apart. The Travis County Family Court was housed in a brutalist concrete building downtown, all harsh angles and fluorescent lighting. Rachel met us in the hallway outside the courtroom, looking every inch the warrior in her tailored suit. Remember, she said, stay calm, answer only what's asked, and don't let them see you break. Melissa's attorney is going to try to make you seem unstable, emotional, unprepared. Don't give them ammunition. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, wood-paneled and formal. Melissa sat at the plaintiff's table with her attorney, Harrison Webb, a silver-haired man who'd apparently won custody cases for 3 Texas governors. She looked the part of concerned family friend, modest dress, minimal makeup, an expression of pained determination. When she saw me, she smiled slightly, the kind of smile that said we both know how this ends. Judge Patricia Hendricks entered, and we all stood. She was a Black woman in her 60s, known for being fair but uncompromising, with no tolerance for theatrics or manipulation. Rachel had said she was our best hope, someone who'd look at the evidence rather than the optics. Harrison Webb stood first, laying out Melissa's case with practiced ease. He painted a picture of tragic loss. Sarah Sullivan, beloved friend, dying too young, leaving 3 helpless infants behind. He spoke of Melissa's deep connection to Sarah, her natural role as honorary aunt, her genuine concern about the children's welfare. Then he pivoted to me, the struggling waitress, the woman with no family support, the person who, however well-intentioned, was simply overwhelmed by circumstances beyond her capacity to manage. Miss Turner is not a bad person. Webb said, his voice dripping with condescension. She did what she could with what she had. But these children, the children of a prominent Texas ranching family, deserve more than good enough. They deserve stability, resources, opportunity. They deserve someone who can provide not just love, but the lifestyle their mother would have wanted for them. It took everything I had not to stand up and scream. Rachel's hand on my arm kept me in my seat. Then it was our turn. Rachel stood, and I saw immediately why she'd earned her reputation. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't appeal to emotion. She simply laid out facts with surgical precision. Your Honor, this case is about one question. Who is the mother of these children? She clicked through a presentation on a small screen, showing photos of the triplets at various ages, all with me. Emily Turner found these babies dying in a dumpster 5 years ago. She called 911, she saved their lives. She then fought through 3 months of bureaucracy to become their foster parent, despite having minimal resources. For 5 years, she has worked multiple jobs to provide for them. She has attended every doctor's appointment, every preschool event, every milestone. She has been present for every fever, every nightmare, every scraped knee, every triumph. Rachel paused, letting the weight of those words settle. Miss Grant, by contrast, has been absent. According to records, she visited the children exactly twice during their infancy, both times before the accident. She made no attempt to find them after they entered the foster system. She expressed no interest in their welfare until 6 months ago, when Mr. Sullivan woke from his coma and began a relationship with Miss Turner. The timing of her sudden concern is not coincidental. It is calculated. Webb objected. The judge overruled. Rachel continued, "We will show, Your Honor, that Miss Grant's petition is not motivated by love for these children, but by possessiveness toward Mr. Sullivan. We will show a pattern of stalking, harassment, and boundary violation. We will show that her interest in these children is not parental, but pathological." The first witness was Dr. Ramesh. He testified about 5 years of regular checkups, all brought by me, all paid for through my work with the clinic's sliding scale program. He described my attention to detail, my questions about development, my commitment to their health. "In my 30 years as a pediatrician," Dr. Ramesh said, "I have rarely seen a parent more devoted than Miss Turner. These children are thriving under her care." Webb cross-examined, trying to establish that I'd struggled financially, that I'd missed appointments due to work conflicts, that the children had been sick more often than average. Dr. Ramesh deflected every insinuation with quiet dignity. "All parents face financial challenges," he said. "What matters is how they respond. Miss Turner always found a way. She always prioritized these children's needs above her own." Next came testimony from Mrs. Chen, who described watching the children during those brutal early years, seeing me come home exhausted from triple shifts, but never too tired to read bedtime stories. Father Miguel testified about the support the church had provided, how the entire congregation had watched these children grow, how I'd become a valued member of the community. Teachers from the preschool testified about the children's happiness, their security, their obvious attachment to me. Then Rachel called Jack to the stand. He looked at me as he was sworn in, his expression a promise. "I've got you." Rachel led him through the basics: his marriage to Sarah, the accident, the coma, waking up to find his children missing. Then the crucial question: "Mr. Sullivan, you are the biological father of these children. Why haven't you petitioned for sole custody?" Jack's answer was clear and unequivocal. "Because Emily Turner is their mother, not by biology, but by every measure that actually matters. She saved them. She raised them. She loved them when I couldn't. Taking them away from her would be cruel to them and unjust to her." "Do you intend to marry Miss Turner?" "Yes. And if this court grants custody to Miss Grant, what will you do?" "I will appeal. I will fight. I will not allow my children to be taken from the woman who has been their mother for 5 years. His voice was steel. Melissa Grant has no claim to these children beyond obsession. She is dangerous, Your Honor. I believe she caused the accident that killed my wife. I believe she's been stalking my family for years, and I believe this custody petition is just another form of that stalking. Webb's cross-examination was aggressive, trying to suggest that Jack's judgment was compromised by his relationship with me, that he was choosing romance over his children's best interests. But Jack didn't waver. I'm choosing family, he said simply. The family Emily built when mine was shattered. Then it was Melissa's turn to testify. Webb walked her through her narrative. Devoted friend to Sarah, honorary aunt, someone who'd always considered these children part of her heart. She spoke about her resources, the estate left by her grandmother, her stable life, her connections that could ensure the children's future success. I'm not trying to take them from Miss Turner out of spite, Melissa said, her voice trembling with practiced emotion. I'm trying to give them what Sarah would have wanted: opportunity, stability, connection to their heritage. Rachel's cross-examination was brutal. Miss Grant, how many times did you visit these children while they were in foster care? I didn't know where they were. Did you try to find them? A pause. I was grieving. For 5 years? It's complicated. Miss Grant, you've attended 5 events at the Sullivan Ranch in the past 4 months. Is that correct? Yes. Were you invited to any of them? Jack and I have history. I didn't need a formal invitation. So you attended family gatherings uninvited? Rachel let that sit. Have you followed Miss Turner to her workplace? I've had coffee at her diner, yes. 17 times in 3 months, according to receipts. That's a lot of coffee. Webb objected. Judge Hendricks allowed the question. Have you accessed or attempted to access the children's medical records? Melissa's composure cracked. I have a right to know about their health. As a non-relative with no legal standing? Did Dr. Ramesh give you those records? He refused, which was following the law. Rachel pulled out a document. I have here a complaint filed by Dr. Ramesh about your aggressive behavior in attempting to access confidential information. Do you deny threatening him? I didn't threaten. You'll regret obstructing me. Those were your words, correct? Melissa's lawyer tried to intervene, but the damage was done. Rachel continued systematically dismantling Melissa's case, revealing the restraining orders, the stalking incidents, the obsessive pattern of behavior. Then came the moment I'd been dreading, my own testimony. I walked to the stand on legs that felt like they'd collapse at any moment. Rachel led me through my story, finding the babies, fighting to keep them, building a life. I described the sleepless nights, the financial struggles, the moments of doubt. I described learning to braid Sophia's hair from YouTube videos, teaching Liam to ride a bike in the parking lot of my apartment complex, helping Emma sound out her first words. Miss Turner, Rachel asked, do you believe you're the mother of these children? I looked at the triplets, sitting in the gallery with Mrs. Chen, 3 faces watching me with absolute trust. Yes, I said, my voice steady. Not because I gave birth to them, because I chose them, every single day, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. Webb's cross-examination tried to paint me as overwhelmed, unstable, clinging to children I had no right to claim. He brought up missed rent payments, times I'd had to use food banks, instances where I'd had to leave the children with neighbors because childcare fell through. Miss Turner, isn't it true that you've struggled to provide basic necessities? Yes, I said, I struggled, but I never failed. Isn't it true that these children would have access to better schools, better opportunities, better everything with Miss Grant? I met his eyes. Better houses, maybe? Better clothes? Sure. But better love? Better security? Better understanding of what it means to be valued? I shook my head. No one can give them better than what we already have, even if it means they grow up in poverty. We're not in poverty anymore, I said quietly. We're building a life, together, as a family. The final witnesses were the children themselves. Judge Hendricks spoke to each of them privately in her chambers, a conversation I wasn't allowed to hear. I sat in the hallway, my hands clasped so tightly my knuckles went white, Jack beside me radiating helpless fury at not being able to protect our children from this. When they emerged, Emma's eyes were red from crying, but she ran straight to me. "I told the judge," she said. "I told her you're our mama." After closing arguments, Judge Hendricks called for a recess to review the evidence. We waited in a conference room, the minutes stretching into hours. Rachel tried to read her expression when she'd left the bench, but admitted she couldn't tell which way the decision would go. "She's careful," Rachel said. "She won't be swayed by emotion. She'll look at the law, the evidence, the children's best interests as she interprets them." "What if her interpretation is wrong?" I whispered. Rachel had no answer for that. We were called back into the courtroom at 4:47 p.m. The late afternoon sun slanted through the high windows, casting long shadows across the floor. Judge Hendricks looked tired, the weight of deciding a family's fate evident in the lines around her eyes. "I've reviewed all testimony and evidence," she began. "This is not an easy case. Both parties clearly care about these children, though their motivations and capacities differ significantly." My heart was pounding so hard I thought everyone could hear it. "Miss Grant has presented herself as stable and resourced. But stability, without genuine attachment, is just a comfortable prison. Miss Turner has presented herself as struggling but devoted. And devotion without resources is a noble burden." The judge paused. "However, this court must consider not just what each party offers, but what the children need. And these children need their mother." I couldn't breathe. Emily Turner has been their mother for 5 years. She has sacrificed, struggled, and persevered. She has been present for every crucial moment of their development. To remove them from her care now would be traumatic and unjust. Furthermore, the evidence suggests Miss Grant's petition is motivated less by genuine concern for the children and more by a problematic fixation on Mr. Sullivan. The pattern of behavior documented in this case raises serious concerns about her judgment and stability. Melissa stood abruptly. "Your Honor, that's not—" "Sit down, Miss Grant." The judge's voice was sharp. "I'm not finished." Melissa sat, her face flushed with rage. "Therefore, this court denies Miss Grant's petition for custody. Emily Turner will retain her position as legal guardian, with the understanding that she and Mr. Sullivan are pursuing a permanent custody arrangement as parents together. Furthermore, I am issuing a restraining order prohibiting Miss Grant from coming within 500 feet of the children or Miss Turner. This hearing is adjourned." The gavel came down. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Rachel grabbed my hand, squeezing hard. "We won," she whispered. "Emily, we won." Jack pulled me into his arms, and I finally let myself break, sobbing against his chest while he held me together. The children rushed over, and we became a tangle of limbs and tears and laughter, right there in the middle of the courtroom. But through my tears, I saw Melissa standing at the plaintiff's table, perfectly still, staring at us with an expression of such pure hatred that it sent a chill down my spine. Her attorney was speaking to her, probably explaining the restraining order, but she wasn't listening. She was just staring, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. "Jack," I whispered, pulling back. "Look!" He followed my gaze, and his arms tightened around me protectively. "It's over," he said. "The law is on our side now." But I knew, with a certainty that had nothing to do with logic, that this wasn't over. Not for Melissa. People like her didn't accept defeat. They recalibrated their strategies. We left the courthouse into the golden light of early evening, emerging into a world that felt fundamentally different than the one we'd entered that morning. News crews were waiting, Apparently, Melissa's father had tried to use his political connections to suppress coverage, but the local media had gotten wind of the human interest story. Struggling waitress fights to keep triplets she rescued from a dumpster. Rachel handled the brief statement. Justice was served today. A family that was built on love and sacrifice has been legally recognized and protected. We're grateful to Judge Hendricks for her wisdom and to everyone who supported Emily Turner in her journey as a mother. We drove back to the ranch in Jack's truck, the children asleep in the back seat, exhausted from the emotion of the day. The sun was setting over the hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that seemed too beautiful for how drained I felt. What do we do now? I asked. We live, Jack said simply. We get married, we raise our children, we move forward. And Melissa? His jaw tightened. We stay vigilant. We follow the restraining order. We trust that the legal system will protect us. But 2 weeks later, we learned that legal protection only works when people choose to respect it. It was a Saturday in early May, and we'd taken the children to the ranch's pond for a picnic. The bluebonnets were in full bloom, carpeting the fields in waves of purple and blue. The triplets were playing at the water's edge while Jack and I set up lunch, and for a few perfect hours, the world felt right. Then my phone rang, an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Emily Turner? A woman's voice, professional and urgent. Yes? This is Detective Sarah Chen with the Austin Police Department. I'm calling about Melissa Grant. My blood went cold. What about her? She's been in an accident. A single-car crash on Highway 71 near the airport. Her car went off an overpass. A pause. Miss Turner, we found documents in her vehicle, surveillance photos of your family, maps of your usual routes, a detailed plan for... We believe she was planning to take the children. I couldn't speak. Jack saw my expression and moved closer, his hand on my shoulder. Is she... I couldn't finish the question. She's alive, but critical. She's at Dell's Seton Medical Center. Another pause. Miss Turner, there's something else. The crash wasn't accidental. She left a note. What kind of note? I can't disclose details, but it appears she was attempting suicide. The note mentions you, the children, and Mr. Sullivan. We're treating this as a potential threat, even though she's incapacitated. I wanted you to be aware. After hanging up, I told Jack everything. We immediately gathered the children and returned to the house, calling Rachel to inform her of the situation. Within hours, we had off-duty police officers patrolling the ranch's perimeter, security cameras installed at every entry point, and an alarm system that would make Fort Knox jealous. The children sensed something was wrong. That night, as I was tucking Sophia into bed, she looked up at me with those impossibly wise eyes and asked, "Is the mean lady going to hurt us?" I wanted to lie, to tell her everything was fine. But I'd promised these children I would always tell them the truth. She can't hurt you now, baby. She's in the hospital, and there are people making sure she can never come near us. Why does she hate us? She doesn't hate you, I said, smoothing her hair. She's confused. She wants something she can't have, and instead of accepting that, she's trying to take it by force. But love doesn't work that way. You can't steal a family. Like how you didn't steal us? Sophia asked. You saved us? Exactly like that. She thought about this then. I'm glad you found us, Mama. Me too, sweetheart, me too. Over the next few weeks, we learned more about Melissa's deteriorating mental state from Detective Chen and from Rachel's investigators. After losing the custody case, Melissa had apparently experienced a complete breakdown. She'd been fired from her job at her father's real estate company for erratic behavior. She'd been posting increasingly unhinged messages on social media, ranting about injustice and corruption in the family court system. She'd been seen outside the ranch gates multiple times, violating the restraining order, though by the time police arrived, she'd always disappeared. The surveillance photos we'd found in her car told a chilling story. She'd been following us for months, documenting our routines, looking for vulnerable moments. There were photos of me dropping the children at preschool, of us grocery shopping, of family dinners at the ranch. She'd been planning something, an abduction, a confrontation, something that would have forced the issue in her favor, but the crash had stopped her. According to investigators, she'd been driving at high speed toward the airport when she'd suddenly swerved off the road, crashing through a guardrail and plummeting 30 feet. The note she'd left suggested it was intentional, a final act of control when everything else had failed. Some people, Rachel explained during one of our meetings, can't tolerate losing. For them, destruction becomes preferable to defeat. Melissa couldn't have Jack and the children, so she decided no one should, including herself. Is that supposed to make me feel better? I asked. No. It's supposed to help you understand that nothing you did caused this. Her obsession, her actions, her choices, those belong to her alone. Melissa survived the crash, but suffered severe injuries. A traumatic brain injury, multiple broken bones, internal damage that would require months of recovery. Her father, Senator Grant, quietly arranged for her to be transferred to a private psychiatric facility in Colorado, far from Texas, far from us, far from any reminder of what she'd tried and failed to do. We never heard from her again. Summer came to the ranch in a wave of heat and golden light. Jack and I were married in a small ceremony by the pond, with just family and close friends in attendance. The triplets were our attendants. Liam carried the rings, Emma scattered wildflower petals, and Sophia held a sign that read, "Finally," that made everyone laugh. When the minister asked if anyone objected, Liam shouted, "No," so loudly and firmly that the entire gathering erupted in applause. It was exactly the kind of chaotic, imperfect, beautiful moment that defined our family. The honeymoon was a weekend trip to Port Aransas, all we could manage with 3 children and a ranch to run. We stayed in a small beach house, built sandcastles, collected shells, and taught the triplets to body surf in the gentle waves. On the last evening, Jack and I sat on the porch while the children slept, watching the moon rise over the Gulf of Mexico. "Do you ever think about how we got here?" he asked, his hand finding mine in the darkness. "Every day," I admitted. "Sometimes it doesn't feel real. Like I'll wake up and still be in that studio apartment, working triple shifts, barely hanging on. But you're not," he said gently. "You're here. We're here. We made it. We almost didn't, but we did. That's what matters." He pulled me closer. "Emily, I need you to hear this. You didn't get lucky. You didn't stumble into this life by accident. You fought for it. You earned it. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every moment you chose them over yourself, that's what built this. Don't ever diminish that." I leaned my head against his shoulder, listening to the waves and letting his words sink in. For so long, I'd felt like an imposter in my own life, waiting for someone to reveal that I didn't deserve the happiness I'd found. But sitting there with the man I loved, in a house filled with the children who called me Mama, I finally began to believe I belonged. Back at the ranch, life settled into a new rhythm. I officially adopted the triplets, adding Turner Sullivan to their last names in a courthouse ceremony that felt like a mirror image of the trial. Same building, same judge, completely different outcome. Judge Hendricks smiled when she signed the papers. "Miss Turner, pardon me, Mrs. Sullivan, I don't often get to see the happy endings in my courtroom. Thank you for reminding me why I do this work." The children started first grade that fall at the small school in town. I volunteered in their classroom once a week, helping with reading groups and art projects, marveling at how confident and secure they'd become. Liam was the social butterfly, making friends with everyone. Emma was the academic, already reading above grade level. Sophia was the artist, always coming home with paintings and drawings that we displayed like gallery pieces on the ranch house walls. I also enrolled in online classes, finally pursuing that nursing degree I'd given up on 6 years ago. It was slow going, fitting coursework around family life and helping with the ranch, but Jack insisted on supporting it. "You gave up your dreams once," he said. "You don't have to give them up again." Dr. Ramesh hired me part-time at the clinic, training me as a medical assistant while I worked toward my degree. It felt right, coming full circle to the place that had supported me through those hardest years, now being able to give back. But the most unexpected healing came from my mother. Carolyn Turner showed up at the ranch one Sunday afternoon in October, driving the same beat-up Honda she'd had for 15 years. I was in the garden with the children when I saw her car pull up the long driveway, and my first instinct was to gather the triplets and run inside. But something made me stay. She got out of the car slowly, looking older than I remembered, her face lined with years of hard living and harder choices. She stood by the car for a long moment, just watching us, before finally walking over. "Emily," she said, her voice rough, Can we talk?" I nodded to Mrs. Chen, who'd been helping with the garden, and she discreetly led the children inside. Then I turned to face my mother, this woman who'd called me a burden, who'd told me I was throwing my life away, who hadn't called in years. "What do you want?" I asked, not unkindly, just tired. "I saw the news," she said, "about the trial, about that woman trying to take your kids." She looked at the house, the land, the life I'd built. "And I realized I was wrong about you, about everything." "Okay," I said, not sure what else to offer. "When you were growing up, I resented you," she continued, the words spilling out like she'd been holding them in too long. "Your father left when you were 2, and I blamed you for it. I blamed you for being poor, for struggling, for not being able to have the life I wanted. And when you found those babies, I thought you were repeating my mistakes, choosing responsibility over opportunity." She wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand. "But you weren't repeating anything. You were breaking the cycle. You chose those children the way I never chose you. You loved them the way I couldn't love you. And you built something beautiful from nothing." Her voice cracked. "I'm proud of you, Emily. And I'm sorry I never told you that before. It wasn't enough. It couldn't undo years of neglect and criticism. But it was something. It was a beginning. I don't know if we can have a relationship," I said honestly. "The children come first. Always. If you're going to be in our lives, you have to respect that. You have to be consistent. You have to show up." "I know," she said, "and I want to try, if you'll let me." I thought about the courtroom, about standing in front of Judge Hendricks and saying that family wasn't about blood, but about choice, about how every day we choose each other, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. "Okay," I said, "we can try." It was slow and awkward at first. Carolyn would visit once a month, always bringing small gifts for the children, nothing expensive, just thoughtful. A book she thought Emma would like, art supplies for Sophia, a baseball glove for Liam. She never tried to be a grandmother in the traditional sense. The children already had Jack's parents for that. Instead, she became something else. A presence, a witness to their lives, a person who was trying to make amends. During one visit around Thanksgiving, she pulled me aside while the children were playing. "You know what I see when I look at you now?" she asked. "What?" "The woman I should have been." She smiled sadly. "You're a better mother than I ever was. And watching you with them, it's teaching me things I should have learned 30 years ago. It's not too late," I said softly. "To learn, to change." "Maybe not," she agreed. "Thanks to you." 5 years after the trial, I sat in the audience at the University of Texas Nursing School graduation ceremony, watching Emma walk across the stage to receive her high school diploma. She was 16, having skipped 2 grades, and already had a full scholarship to UT Austin. Liam and Sophia sat on either side of me, now tall and gangly in that teenage way, both rolling their eyes at Emma's valedictorian speech about the power of chosen family. Jack leaned over and whispered, "She gets that from you, you know? The whole speeches thing." "She gets her intelligence from you," I countered. I just taught her that intelligence should be used for good. After the ceremony, we gathered at the ranch for a celebration. Emma's graduation had become a community event. Half the town showed up, bringing covered dishes and congratulations. Dr. Ramesh was there, now retired but still keeping tabs on his kids. Mrs. Chen brought her famous dumplings. Father Miguel blessed the gathering with a prayer that made everyone cry. As the sun set and people began to leave, Emma found me in the kitchen cleaning up. She was still wearing her cap and gown, her honor cords glinting in the overhead light. "Mom," she said. She'd never called me anything else. "I need to tell you something." I set down the dish I was washing. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong." She took a breath. "I got a letter yesterday from a facility in Colorado. It's from Melissa Grant." My heart stopped. We'd never told the children the full story about Melissa, just that she was someone who'd been confused and had tried to take them away, but that the courts had protected them. They knew she'd been in an accident and was now in long-term care, but we'd shielded them from the darker details. "She wants to see us," Emma continued. "All three of us. She says she's been in therapy for years, that she understands now what she did wrong, and she wants to apologize before—" She paused. "Her doctors don't think she has much time left." Jack appeared in the doorway, having clearly been eavesdropping. "You don't have to go," he said firmly. "You don't owe her anything." "I know," Emma said, "but I want to understand. I want to know who she was, what she wanted, why she tried to take us from you." She looked at me with those wise eyes she'd had since birth. I'm old enough now to hear the truth. So we told them. All three of them, sitting in the ranch house living room after everyone else had gone. We told them the whole story. About Sarah's death and Jack's coma, about Melissa's obsession and stalking, about the trial and the surveillance and the suicide attempt. We told them about the note she'd left, about her hatred and her unraveling, about how close they'd come to being caught in her delusion. Liam's reaction was anger. "She tried to take us? After everything you did?" Sophia's was sadness. She must have been so broken inside. But Emma's was curiosity. "I want to meet her," she said, "not to forgive her, not to make her feel better, but to understand what could make someone do something so terrible." 2 weeks later, we made the trip to Colorado, Jack, me, and the triplets. The facility was high in the mountains, a converted mansion that served as both psychiatric hospital and hospice for patients with complex needs. Melissa's father had spared no expense in her care, but no amount of money could undo what her actions had done to her body and mind. She was in a wheelchair in a sunny room overlooking the mountains. At 44, she looked 70, her hair gray, her body frail, the traumatic brain injury having aged her prematurely. But her eyes were clear when she saw us, clearer than I'd ever seen them before. "Emily," she said, her voice thin, "you came." "The kids wanted to," I said, keeping my distance. "This is for them, not for you." She nodded, then looked at the triplets, 3 teenagers who bore no resemblance to the toddlers she'd tried to claim. "You've grown so much," she whispered. "You're beautiful. All of you." "Why did you do it?" Emma asked, characteristically direct. "Why did you try to take us?" Melissa was quiet for a long moment. "Because I confused possession with love," she finally said. "I thought if I couldn't have Jack, I could have pieces of what he'd had with Sarah. I thought that by taking you, I could rewrite history, make myself the mother, make myself essential, make myself loved." She looked at me then, really looked at me. I didn't understand that love isn't something you take. It's something you give, even when it costs you everything. The way Emily gave to you. "You killed Jack's wife," Liam said, his voice hard. "You orphaned us." "Yes." No denial, no excuse. I sabotaged the brakes on their truck because I was angry that Sarah had what I wanted. I told myself it was an accident, that I'd only meant to scare them, but that was a lie. I knew what would happen, and I've lived with that knowledge every day since. She closed her eyes. If I could undo it, I would. But I can't. All I can do is tell you the truth and hope that someday you can live free of what I tried to do to your family. We already are free, Sophia said softly. We always were, because our mom never let your hate touch us. Melissa looked at me again, and in her eyes I saw something I'd never expected. Genuine remorse. You're a remarkable woman, Emily Turner. You loved them when I tried to destroy them. You built a family from ashes. You're the mother they deserved, and I'm sorry I tried to take that from you. I could have said nothing. I could have walked out. But looking at this broken woman who'd caused so much pain, I felt something unexpected. Pity. I hope you find peace, I said quietly. Real peace. Not because you deserve it, but because everyone deserves a chance to be free from their worst selves. We didn't stay long. On the drive back, the kids were quiet, processing what they'd seen. Finally, Emma spoke. I understand now why you fought so hard for us. It wasn't just about keeping us. It was about protecting us from becoming what she became. Someone who confuses possession with love. Exactly, I said. Love is the choice to keep showing up, keep caring, keep putting someone else's needs above your own wants. That's the only definition that matters. Melissa Grant died 6 weeks later. Her father sent a brief note informing us, along with a check for a substantial amount. Guilt money, blood money, whatever you want to call it. Jack and I set up a scholarship fund in Sarah's name with it, for single parents pursuing higher education. It felt like the right way to turn something toxic into something that might help others. I graduated with my nursing degree on a warm May morning, exactly 10 years after I'd found 3 babies in a dumpster. The triplets were 20 years old now, all attending UT Austin. Emma studying medicine, Liam in the business school learning to help run the ranch, Sophia in the art program. They sat in the front row of the graduation ceremony, holding a sign that read, Our Mom, the Nurse, with a photo of me in my scrubs. After the ceremony, we gathered at the ranch for a celebration, our family's tradition now, marking every milestone with the same community that had supported us through the hardest times. Dr. Ramesh was there, now in his 80s but still sharp. Mrs. Chen brought her dumplings, just like always. Father Miguel gave the blessing. My mother was there too, having finally earned her place in our family through years of consistent love and support. As the sun began to set and I stood on the porch watching my children laugh with their friends, Jack came up behind me and wrapped his arms around my waist. What are you thinking? He asked. I'm thinking about that night 10 years ago, I said. About how close I came to walking a different route home. About how 3 lives, 4, counting mine, changed because of one choice. Best choice you ever made, he murmured against my hair. Second best, I corrected. The best choice was saying yes when you asked me to marry your whole family. He laughed, that deep rumble I'd grown to love. Fair enough. Emma came over, pulling Liam and Sophia with her. Actually, she said, the best choice was keeping your promise. Remember? You promised you'd never leave us. Every kid wonders if their parents would choose them again, Liam added quietly. We never had to wonder. We saw you choose us every single day. I looked at my 3 children, no longer the dying infants from that dumpster, but strong, confident young adults who knew without question that they were loved, that they were chosen, that they were worth every sacrifice. You 3 made it easy, I said softly. You were always worth choosing. Sophia hugged me tight. No, Mom. We were screaming babies who ruined your life plan, but you chose us anyway. That's what makes it matter. Standing there on the porch of the ranch, surrounded by the family I'd built from nothing but love and stubbornness, I finally understood the truth. I hadn't saved them. We had saved each other. 3 babies had given a lost waitress a purpose. A grieving widower had given a struggling mother partnership. A broken community had come together to prove that family isn't about blood. It's about the choice to show up, to keep showing up, to love even when it costs everything. And in that moment, with the Texas sunset painting the sky in shades of gold and my family's laughter filling the air, I knew with absolute certainty every sleepless night, every sacrifice, every moment of doubt had been worth it. Because love, real love, isn't about perfection. It's about promise. And I'd kept mine.